coverage on Eurosport of this year's UK Championships. We're already down to the last 64. Most of the big names are through, apart from the defending champion Neil Robertson, who was surprisingly knocked out of the competition in the first round. Here to dissect all the balls potted and missed over the next 9 days, alongside me on the couch are the former UK Championship runner-up Neil Foulds and the former winner from 1992, the whirlwind Jimmy White. Lads, good to see you.
How you doing?
I always get very excited before a tournament begins, and of course the UK is up there with the biggest of them all, certainly from a ranking perspective. You have the world, then you have the UK. Jim, we'll start with you, the 1992 winner, what, 24 years ago, but your name's on the trophy.
Yeah.
When you were growing up as a kid and you were watching everyone on telly, how important was it to tick that box of UK champion?
Well, the UK Championships is a second to the World Championships, and it's always been there. It's always been more frames. Everyone wants to win the UK, and I think you find that the best players do end up winning the UK. You very rarely get, like, a player come through, big odds player, and win the UK because of the more frames situation.
Neil, we were speaking backstage about when you got to the final in '86. You played brilliant snooker. Along the way, beat the likes of Jimmy and John Parrott. Sorry, Jimmy told me to say that. But the final then was over 2 days, and Jimmy quite rightly said that it's very rare that you don't get the best player of the week or the 2 weeks winning the competition. Is that the same now because the final's only 1 day? Does it change at all?
Things have changed a lot in this tournament. First of all, it was best of 17 all the way through until the final, which was best of 31 that year. You know, I was playing brilliantly that year, but playing Steve Davis over 2 days, that was tough for me. I wasn't quite ready for that kind of a battle because I went in front early on, but he beat me heavily, and I think the tournament has changed. I don't think snooker has to be that long anymore. Certainly not the UK Championship. We accept that the World Championship's got 4 session matches towards the end. I'm happy with the format. I know people would like to see the first round to be longer, but generally I think in this modern age, best of 11 feels like quite a long match now.
Yeah, it's only 3 tournaments with best of 11. You've got the Shanghai, and there's another tournament which is best of 11.
The International is one of them, isn't it? It's long matches as well. Of course, at the Masters as well, which is the Premier Invitation event.
Yeah, OK. We've already mentioned that defending champion Neil Robertson is out of the competition. Matt Smith is in York for the next 9 days for us. Here he is with all the latest news.
Thanks, Andy, and a warm welcome to the Barbican, our home for the next week and a bit. Of course, already shocks and stories in no small measure here in York UK Championship, well underway for a few days now. Neil Robertson, the defending champion, has already, as I'm sure many of the viewers at home are aware, crashing out in the first round to an amateur player, no less, in Peter Lyons. Fantastic story for him. And, of course, Alan McManus, 5-0 down in his first round encounter, somehow won the 6 frames he needed, including a 130 in the decider, to clinch his place in round 2. We're also, of course, graced with perhaps as competitive an era in terms of potential tournament winners as any of us can remember in the modern era. Already the big names are hunting or have landed a big trophy this season. You think of Mark Selby, John Higgins twice, Judd Trump, Ding Junhui, all have been winners already this season. Our own Ronnie O'Sullivan, you'd say, knocking on the door pretty hard of late with a couple of finals. He'll be pretty keen to add another ranking title to his illustrious collection. Of course, the UK, a tournament he won at the tender age of 17. How long ago was that? He's knocking on 41 now, Ronnie, although I think enjoying his snooker as much as ever. We'll see him in action over the next couple of days. Still an 8-table format in total for another couple of days. The 4 here in the main arena and 4 behind. Then we slim down to 4 tables from Monday and eventually to 2 for the quarters, semis and final. But as discussed, you could make a case for certainly 6 and maybe 10 or 12 players that have serious hopes of picking up this UK Championship next Sunday.
Yeah. Who's your money on? Here's a confirmation of the big winners so far. We saw Mark King, I should say, win live on Eurosport. What was it, last weekend? Incredible final. John Higgins, his name is up there again. Some fantastic form he has hit recently. World number 1, Mark Selby. You can pick out your favourite. But you'd be a brave man to bet against any of those players not being here on the last day of the competition. This is who the bookies think will win the competition. Ronnie O'Sullivan 12-5, as I mentioned, world champion. World number 1, Mark Selby 5.5 to 1. Judd is in there as well, 6.5. Jimmy, I know you like a flutter. Where's the safe money, Jim? I mean, can you pick a winner in the UK?
I've been known to have a bet. I really do fancy Ronnie O'Sullivan. In his last match, his first round match, he won 6-0 and he won 6 games in 1 visit. He doesn't play Mark Selby, who can, you know, sort of can grind him down a bit, and he doesn't play John Higgins, who he respects, and he's won lots of tournaments. So I really fancy Ronnie O'Sullivan, and to see his name not on the board there, playing in so many tournaments so far this season. I know he missed a couple at the beginning. Is a bit of a shock, so I really think it's O'Sullivan's week.
Yeah, Neil, let me ask you about Ronnie, because he said recently in the press after seeing Mark King win the Northern Ireland that at the age of 42, maybe he's got one more big competition left in him. I think maybe he's underplaying it slightly. We all think of Ronnie,
Yeah.
you know, not just a UK winner, but certainly a World Championship winner. Maybe he's got 2 or 3 of those tournaments left in him. For your money, the tournament favourite, rightly so?
Yes, but one of the other reasons is because the way the draw's working out, he's got just the best draw you can imagine. I can't see him getting beaten before at least the quarter-finals. Now, famous last words, we know all that, and anyone can beat anyone within reason. And Ronnie is overdue to win. But now that Neil Robertson's gone out in that top part, I think he's got a great chance of being in the semi-finals before he has a game, and then it might be Ding Junhui and Judd Trump. And the other thing, and I said it when we was with Ronnie last week in front of him, and I didn't mean to embarrass him, the fact is, I think some of the matches he's playing in are of a higher standard. I mean, he played Kyron Wilson and made 3 centuries and lost 4-3. Wilson was fantastic, and the match after it was so much worse. So while he's not winning, guys are raising their game against him. I still think he sets the standard of all the players, personally.
Yeah. Jimmy, we'll talk about John Higgins a bit later on, but the reason I mentioned John is because someone that's hit so much form at the moment. The complete opposite for Neil Robertson, defending champion. Last month, 6 weeks, is, you know, to his own standards, by his own admission, he's been pretty awful. And again, defending champion goes out in the first round.
It's been a shock. He hasn't won a match for over 5 weeks or so, and you know, he didn't play in Belfast to get ready for the UK Championships, and you thought he'd be fighting fit, you know, and he's the ultimate professional. He practices, he keeps fit, and, you know, it was a big shock, the Peter Lyons one. Not saying that Peter Lyons is not a good player, but Peter Lyons needs 2 or 3 chances to win a frame because he doesn't score as heavy as the top 16, say, and for him to beat Robertson was a bit of a shock.
Neil, I love the word confidence when it comes to snooker. Again, John Higgins, you know, he's got this from nowhere, really, this huge bundle of confidence, started winning again, one of the favourites now for all the biggies, including the World and the Masters. How does a player lose the confidence? What happens? And how does he get it back in Neil's case?
Well, that's what Neil needs to find out, isn't it? How John Higgins has turned things around. I mean, obviously, losing to Peter Lyons, he's an amateur player. That's a little bit unfair to him, but Matt is right. He's an amateur. He's been on the tour for many years now. The worst thing about losing to Peter Lyons, he's not even the best player in his own family, because his son is higher ranked than him.
Yeah.
And that's the truth, you know. So that's hard to take for Neil. As far as John Higgins is concerned, you know, people have written him off in the last year or two. He's back. Whatever has changed in his mind in the last month, I don't know what it is. There's a few things it could be. But he's winning again, and if you've got the class, and we know Neil's got it, and John clearly has got it, then when you get your game back, you can be very dangerous. You know, John is, you could argue, equally the man to beat this week. I wonder if maybe that little purple patch is coming to an end now, but he's been brilliant, you know. As far as Neil is concerned, he's just got to go back and forget the next couple of weeks, I guess. I don't know if he's playing in Glasgow, and come back, and he'll be a better player. World Championships could be his big deal.
Yeah. Jimmy, one of the favourites for the competition, one of my favourites to watch, player that plays the game a bit like yourself, is Judd Trump. He's going to be a tough player to beat this week, isn't he?
Yeah, he had a really good run, and then it come to an end when he lost to Wembo, and then obviously the best in Belfast, it's only the best of 7. The UK Championships will be one that he desperately wants to win. I know he's won it before, but it's more frames, and you know, he's very confident at the moment, Trump, and as we know, when he's cueing well, he can just pot them from anywhere.
Does it make a difference? You mentioned he's won it there. There's a few players obviously playing that have their name already on the trophy. Does it make a difference, Jim, when you go into a major knowing you've already won it? Does it take a little bit of pressure off you?
Well, absolutely. You know, I know there's so many tournaments now, and people are all becoming like Mark King just won a tournament last week. But to win the UK Championship, it is a bit special, you know. It's the second biggest, it will always be the second biggest tournament on the calendar, and everyone wants to get their hands on the trophy.
OK, boys, for the moment, thanks as always. More from Neil and Jimmy in just a moment. And, of course, when we come back, we'll start the coverage of this year's UK Snooker Championships. We'll see you in a minute. Coming up live on Eurosport on Table 1, it's Mark Selby against Daniel Wells. And on the Eurosport Play, you can watch John Higgins against Noppon Sandkalm. And staying with John Higgins for a moment, we can find out exactly what his recent changes in his game, because Matt Smith caught up with him earlier on.
So where has this return to the old form come from, which is it's probably a 2-year return, isn't it? It's not like it's the last few months.
Yeah.
It's been coming a while after perhaps a couple of years where you lost your magic touch.
Yeah, I think obviously, the last World Championship win, 2011, I think I went missing for maybe 2 or 3 years. I was tinkering about with cues and things, and yeah, and then you're thinking your confidence takes a little bit of a hit with the amount of defeats you're having, and then you're thinking you're getting to that age where you're obviously going to hit the downhill slope, and then you maybe begin to feel sorry for yourself and things like that, and it just snowballs. But I changed cue maybe about 18 months ago, got a little bit of confidence back with just certain wins, and then I've won about 5 tournaments in the last 18 months, which, yeah, it's been brilliant.
The shorter format obviously gives some players a chance to pip a bigger seed, a bigger name, doesn't it, particularly in those early rounds. But still, there's a group, and actually the 3 of you turned pro back in '92, Ronnie, yourself and Mark, who are still there or thereabouts. This gathering storm of young players, they haven't quite knocked you off your perches yet.
No, I think as well, obviously, I think Ronnie's, I think he was favourite maybe 20 odd years ago for this tournament, and he's favourite now, so he's like a one-off. I'm still hanging round about, and I don't think it will be long before Mark Williams is winning an event. I think he's close to winning an event. So obviously we're still there, but there is obviously the other top players, the guys in their 30s like your Selby and Robertsons, although obviously Neil lost here. And then you have Trump and Ding coming after them now, so I don't think snooker has been in better hands really with the likes of the players coming through.
And what keeps the fire burning for you now that you've refound your touch, that desire to hold back the tides of time? What keeps you going at it?
I just think winning. I just think winning an event. I mean, I've always said it in the past, don't try and get too down on yourself, because there's more lows in this game than there is highs. But when you get a high, enjoy it, because you don't know when it'll be your last one, and there's no better feeling. I know I've won a few big tournaments in China lately, but I won quite a big event in Coventry, and there's no better feeling having all your family and friends there and for you to have a good night and enjoy it, and that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, you'd be a brave man to bet against this man, John Higgins. Man in form, currently up to 4 in the world, 2 titles so far this season, but certainly Neil and Jimmy, the man to beat. I'm always surprised, certainly with an older player, no disrespect to the older players on the scene, but I was talking to Ronnie actually last week, or I think it was 2 weeks ago when we were in Manchester for the English Open, and I said, who's still the toughest player on the circuit to beat? And he said, John. And I said, do you think he's got another world title in him? And he said, yeah. And I was like, honestly, you can see that because he's getting on a bit and his form's not that great, and then all of a sudden this form has come from nowhere, and he will be. He's one of the favourites for this. He'll be one of the favourites for the Masters and the World Championship as well. I'm guessing, Jim, as you get older, the game gets more difficult. So for him to do what he's doing at this age makes it even more incredible.
Absolutely, but I think the thing with John Higgins, he's got such a good technique and such a good all-round game. He very rarely plays the wrong shot under pressure or flowing. And Ronnie O'Sullivan's got so much respect for John Higgins because they've had so many battles together. But the difference, I think, between John Higgins and Ronnie O'Sullivan's super fit, you know, so I think Ronnie O'Sullivan's got quite a bit more time, you know, to win more tournaments. But John Higgins is just a class act all round, and if you leave him an opportunity, he'll take it.
This was his 147 last week, and it's kind of just the icing on the cake from a couple of weeks. He was just a big smile on his face, you know, not only in Coventry, but when he got over to Belfast. OK, in the end, he lost to another legend of that era, you know, Mark Williams, but he's on the crest of a wave. I actually think he might not win this week. I think all these players are so good that he might have just hit a peak there, and he might struggle. But he is the man to beat, don't get me wrong, because all the pressure's off him.
Yeah, but he can work the other way. I think he might, you know, flow now, because he got beat by Mark Williams. Mark Williams played really well in that match in Belfast, and he's in the other half. It could be a Higgins-O'Sullivan final.
Let me ask you, is it a young man's game? We're talking about John Higgins now. We're talking about Stuart Bingham, recently became world champion a couple of years ago. Barry Hawkins is playing the best snooker he's ever played. Is it a young man's game anymore, Jimmy, or not?
I think with the, you know, obviously you've got to be fit. Most of these lads are fit. I think, you know, I'm still playing. I'm still on the main tour. And my thought process, I can be playing so well in practice, You go into a match and, you know, you can all of a sudden you lose your thought pattern and you can be all over the place. But I think if you enjoy practising, which these lads, you know, they do it for a living, they enjoy practising. I think, like Ray Reardon didn't win his first world title till he was 35 years of age, so I think you can go on. It's not like football or boxing, is it? You know, you've got to be fairly fit.
So there you go. John Higgins coming up later on this afternoon, as is current world #1 world champion Mark Selby. Tom Anderson caught up with him earlier on to find out what's going through his mind.
Yeah. So, Mark, you're one of several big players who chose to set up the tournament at Belfast last week. What was the thinking behind that decision?
Just to have a bit of time at home, really. We've been playing so many tournaments now all around the world, not really having that much time at home. So I don't think it's physically possible to play in every single tournament. I think you have to pick and choose, and I chose to miss last week in Belfast.
You've had a good season so far, including that fantastic win over Ding in the final of the China International Championship. How confident are you feeling in your game so far this season?
Yeah, good. I mean, I've started off the season well, probably the best I've started in any season as a professional, so can't really complain, but at the same time, obviously, you can be playing well and you can still get beat, so I just go out there and try and be confident and give it my best.
You played Daniel Wells this afternoon, someone that viewers won't necessarily know too much about. So you beat him in all your 3 previous encounters. What can we expect today?
Yeah, Daniel's a good up-and-coming player. I think he's bordering getting in the 64, which obviously shows what kind of calibre of player he is. So I need to be on my toes, because if Daniel gets off to a good start, he's more than capable of going on to win the match. So if I play as good as I know I can play, and then I'll be confident of coming through.
Thanks very much, Mark. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, world #1 and world champion Mark Selby, having a decent season by his standards, has won this competition before back in 2012, and that's everything you need to know about the man. Just under £250,000 won so far this year, not bad. Jimmy, he's the type of player, we're talking about John Higgins, who needs to hit the top of his form to win competitions. Mark could easily win a competition not playing the best, because he's such a tough player to beat, isn't he?
We're such a competitor, you know, you have to, you know, if you're really playing well against him, he might slow it down a bit. But his safety game, scoring, you know, and his will to win is next to none. So you've always got to put Mark Selby in the top 4 of winning any tournament.
Neil, how highly do you rate him? He's 2-time world champion now. He's been at #1 since, what, I think 4 or 5 years now. Very consistent player. Do you put him up there with snooker's greats yet?
No, but he's out on his own in the rankings right now, and he's miles clear on money and everything like that. And he's one of the toughest guys to beat, you know. He hit a bit of form after he won the World Championships. He lost in the final in Shanghai to Ding, and then he gave him an absolute shellacking in the next tournament, 10-1, the International, a big event, and it was an annihilation, actually, all the way through. So we know he's playing well. We know he had a break last week to refresh his batteries or recharge his batteries, whatever you want to say. He was watching all of that snooker in Belfast on the television, I can assure you, because he sent me a few texts. Oh, he's playing well, he's not. That's what he does. He watches the lot. You know, he's not really having a rest. He's just not playing, but watching everything.
Also, I just noticed in that VT day, he's got his best friend over from China, Bobby Lee, who's, he used to be a player from Leicester, now lives in China. And he always has him at his biggest tournaments. He's never been at the UK before. He's always at the World Championship and the Masters. So that just shows to me that he's taking this one very serious.
And a quick word about his opponent, Daniel Wells. He's ranked 68 in the world. Do you give him much chance to win this game?
He's got to get off to a good start. He's sort of... he sort of gets the lead and closes up a bit, which I think with Mark Selby, you've got to take your chances because there's no one better tactician than him.
OK. The talking is nearly over. The snooker will commence. Live coverage of this year's UK Snooker Championship coming your way in, what, 2 minutes' time. We'll see you in a second. Got Neil Foulds and Jimmy White alongside me now. Just before you go out, when you're playing a game, Jim, how nervous do you get? Are you thinking about what's coming up? Were you superstitious as a player? Do you do anything?
I think if you don't get the butterflies or don't get a bit of a genuine playing, I think that's half the buzz of it. Different players do different things. They talk to the coach. Maybe some of them hit a few balls. Depends what mood you're in, really, but it's getting in the zone. It's trying to get focused.
Yeah.
We touched on Daniel Wells before earlier on about how important it is that he gets off to a decent start in the game. If he goes 1 or 2 behind a player that's ranked 68, 70 in the world, do their heads tend to drop and it's basically impossible for them to come back if that happens?
Yeah, he's got a bad record, as you heard, against Mark Selby. Lost every time. He's one of the Paul Hunter scholarship players from the past, and he went off the tour quite quickly. He didn't win a match for virtually a year. He's back on now. He can play, You know, he's a slightly manufactured player, and I think he'll come second in this match. I don't really think he'll win. But like you say, he needs to get a start. If he doesn't get a start, it'll be 6-1, I think.
And what about the players that are not used to playing on the match table in front of the big cameras and lights? Because I was watching on Eurosport Player, actually, the first round. I was watching Ronnie's game, and it was a packed house there for a game in the first round, the 1-2-8. For a player that's not used to the bright lights and the cameras, does that make a big difference? Do you up your game subconsciously or not?
Well, you know you're being watched by everyone. It can affect a lot of people. The first time on a TV table when we was first playing, you know, it's a big ordeal. But there's so many tournaments now. There's cameras everywhere. That won't be a problem. But as Neil says, I think it'll be 6-1, 6-0.
OK, well, I think the waiting is over. We can hand over now to Rob Walker, the MC for this afternoon, to welcome the players into the arena.